Okay, we're live.
Welcome everyone to this wonderful evening. We're about to have a little private sit down with Tamuri Richardson, where we're going to talk about trusting someone else's heart, her new book, called My Personal Journey. We will be discussing this book, and I have tons of questions because I read it from cover to cover, and hoping that everyone else will. So Tamuri, before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience who you are and give us a little bit of background about you.
Absolutely. First off, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you for being the moderator for tonight. So thank you. So for those of you who do not know, my name is Tamuri Richardson. I am the mother of 2 teenage children. I live in Solano County. I am a professional motivational speaker. This is my 4th book. I'm a 2-time best-selling author and also international best-selling author. And on top of being a communications coach, I am also a TEDx coach as well. So I coach the up-and-coming speakers on the TED Talk stage as well. And recently elected as the Solano County Black Chamber of Commerce president. So very excited to be a part of the journey and see my journey moving forward. So thank you so much for being here tonight and listening to my story.
Thank you. And I guess I'll go ahead and introduce myself and just mention briefly how you and I connected. My name is Kevin Nichols. I am the founder, president, and CEO of the Social Engineering Project. It's a nonprofit organization here in the Bay Area designed to address the lack of diversity in the tech industry. We have a partnership with Stanford University, and we get young kids interested in traditional STEM. And last year we had a program called a Career Mentorship Symposium, and you lended your talents to our students and got our high school and college students prepared to get internships in the summer. So I want to thank you for that. And one of the reasons why I'm indebted to you. So yeah, hopefully this makes us even. So I read your book. Thank you for sending me the advance copy. I feel special. We're going to, I'm going to ask you some questions about it because I'm one of those analytical readers when I read things. So you mentioned this word box numerous times throughout the book. You have a definition in there, but I'd like for you to define what box means. And then, first of all, you have acronyms. So I want to define box for us so that we have proper context to set the stage of this conversation over.
So for box, it was very important for me as I was trying to figure out my part in all of this, if there was a part and what that looks like. And I realized that so many times, oftentimes we are put in a box. And I just kind of broke it down that the B in box is for beholden, how we feel beholden to people based upon their expectations or our expectations of what they've done or what we expect them to do. The O was for obligated, and how we often obligated ourselves to people without even a necessary conversation on what that looks like. It's just like someone doing a favor for you as opposed to expecting it to be a favor. You now feel obligated to do something in return. Obligation can yield stress and anxiety, but that's part of the box that we put ourselves in. The X is X-ray. And I came up with that because in order for someone to really put you in a box and to be able to know you well enough to know that I can put Tamuri in this category, they have to be able to really be processing and studying you. And it doesn't have to be anything negative or nasty. It could be a family member just knowing I can run over this person. I've put them in this category, and that's how I can process this person. So really understanding the box that I was in was a part of the journey to me kind of kicking myself out of it, if you will.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that everybody knows what box means to you. Tell me, like, how do you try to free young girls, or women out of their box?
I often speak, and just to put a little context with this, for those who may not know, my personal journey in trusting someone else's heart is me sharing my story of being married to someone, my second spouse, who was a avid drug abuser. He was a meth addict that he hid well. I didn't know it, didn't know what it looked like. I didn't come from abuse. He had hidden bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. I'm sure he didn't know. So when I got to the point where I could process my journey and I could do what I needed to do, I often do keynote addresses, and I call myself a domestic violence conqueror. No disrespect to being a domestic violence survivor, but they have different contexts. And when I talk to young girls or women or even men who are just as much abused by women as women are by men, it just doesn't come out as often. The importance of the journey. How do you get there? What does it look like? Like, abuse doesn't just happen. It's part of that box. You're being trained. That person is putting you in a category. They're learning. I was being trained. And as confident as I am, as strong as a person as I am, I tell young girls all the time, don't look at my strength and think nothing can happen to me. It can, it has, it do, it will. It's all about your ability to process it, know it, acknowledge it, and then move from it. That's what it is. So I want young girls to always understand and recognize always how we play a part sometimes in our situations, but to be aware and to be alert and not to be fearful of getting out of it.
And I'm glad that you took a moment to give a little bit more context, a lot more than I gave. So my bad on that. Mm-hmm. A part of this is wanting to get people motivated, inspired to go out and buy this book and read it themselves and not give away the whole book, but also it's good to have that context as far as understanding of, marriage, understanding how you got into this marriage, what precursors you got into it for, and how you eventually maneuvered to get out of it as well. Mm-hmm. I'd like to talk to you or ask you a question about, you mentioned religion a lot in this book. You're vague and ambiguous regarding a specific type of religion. I'm Catholic, so I just come out and say I'm Catholic. You here, it obviously seems like there's a purpose of why you're not linking your belief in Christianity. I got the fact that you're some type of Christianity, but you didn't link it to a particular sect. Is there a reason for that?
There is. One, out of respect for people who I know who are still in the religion. And also, I know religious people that are very near and dear to my heart. And what I wanted people to know in the book is that this is my experience and my journey. I'm not telling anyone what to do with organized religion. I'm just saying, for me, this was not the thing. I don't name it as to be respectful, because even though I no longer practice it, I obtained a lot of grounding from that religion. A lot of balance that I have in my life. It was how I grew up. So even though there were things that kind of may have a negative connotation for me, there were still great things about it. And I don't ever want to bring reproach or cast anything in a negative light if I don't have to. So that's the reason specifically why I don't mention the name of the religion. But I think most people that were in organized religion, they get it.
Okay. And you mentioned this, but it has a positive impact in your upbringing and your raising as a woman, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, there were some things in there. You'd mentioned that this particular religion didn't encourage you to go to school, didn't encourage you to do, some things that I thought were kind of like, I'm like, what kind of religion is that? I don't know where Jesus said that, you should educate yourself, So, I was just curious about like that. But you're saying, though, as far as values and that kind of stuff, it was very support system for you.
Absolutely. And I think I think every child should have some religious structure. Without having it, I think kids go through life sometimes without really understanding that there are higher forces, higher beings than your mother and father. There are higher expectations. I understood that. But I think oftentimes religion can be used to beat you into submission. And that's what I found to be the case. That instead of it being something to nurture and love, it was, if you don't do this, this is going to happen. Well, if you do this, this is going to happen. And so after a while, you can end up resenting. There were a lot of wonderful things. I mean, I think the fact that I'm a public speaker and I speak well and I communicate well came from us giving presentations and practicing and speaking and being articulate. But it wasn't what I needed it to be. And I think oftentimes when we realize that religion is man's thing and the Bible is God's thing, and we are able to separate the two, my relationship is not with religion, it's with God. And that's what I focus on.
Understood. All right, now I gotta ask you about, now this book is about relationships and marriages, etc. Now you're all in on marriage too, but there was a first marriage. And I'm quoting here or subquoting, but you said that first husband was honorable, a good provider, confident person. So, and then you were like, period, and moved on to something else. So I didn't hear anything about why the marriage failed. What happened if this person was all those great things, right. And what wasn't learned from that marriage, taking it into the second one that you talk about and focus mostly in the book?
Right. That's such a good question. I think for my first husband, who we are great friends, he's remarried and we have a wonderful relationship. We co-parent. It was a different type of relationship in where I don't know if I necessarily saw the longevity. I've always been a very career-oriented person and very focused on goals. And sometimes when you can be so very caught up on the numbers and the times and when you want to do things, I don't think I necessarily matched myself with the right person. I didn't think our personalities was a great match. I have a stronger personality. His personality is a little bit more milder. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't a good match. And so when you don't match, you don't match. And, absolutely no excuse for running into, husband number two and clearly overlooking red flags. But I still think no matter what you do and whatever relationship you go into, there has to be love. There has to be that connection. There has to be that feeling where you feel that you're going to connect with this person. And unfortunately, I felt more of that connection with the second husband than I did with the first. So I felt that going our separate ways made more sense. There's somebody out there for everyone. Why would we stay in a relationship where we're not happy when we both can go find happiness? That's selfish. So that's kind of the answer to that.
and I presume this, but the father of your children is the first husband. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Just making sure. Okay. So back in 2014, you talk about your failed marriage. And then you mentioned you knew his siblings and his parents. Had you have known his siblings and parents, you wouldn't have married them. But you don't really explain why. I don't understand what the rush was to get married. And I don't understand how you didn't have that opportunity to really get to know his side of the family first. Like what, you weren't pregnant, right? So like there was no reason for no shotgun marriage, right? So like it seemed like it was 0 to 100. So what was going on such that you didn't get a chance to meet his family? And tell me about that first.
Just really bad judgment. I think that I was looking for something like and this is what I tell myself. I was looking for something and he came at a time. Remember when I was talking about that X in the box? Like before we started dating, he had been scoping and had been, and I think a woman with kids. I think he definitely have narcissistic traits, but I think he looked for women with kids. I definitely say no matter what and how he's behaved and acted, the onus is on me to protect me and my kids. There was no reason I needed to rush into that relationship. And I think oftentimes women do because, I was married once. I didn't have to be married again, but I found myself finding something in him that I needed at the time. And maybe it was calm. I was coming out of my religious situation that was not what I thought it would be. And it was completely emotionally wrecking. I meet this person who's calm, whose demeanor is, he's tall, he's handsome, his demeanor is, like, oh yeah, I got you, babe. And I'm like, I need that at the time. And instead of trusting myself, trusting my gut, I went with that false sense of security. And this is the situation. So there's no good answer for it. So I'm not going to fake and give you one. I did not have to rush and get married. And I knew when I was getting married, I didn't trust my gut told me,
And so does that explain why you didn't tell your guy friends too? It seems like you had a good crew of guy friends that had your back, but they kind of were left out as well.
Yeah. I think anytime you do something that you're not sure about, or you're kind of like, you don't go and check all the boxes because you don't always know what all the boxes going to come up with. And at that time I was like, okay, this could work. All right. I don't see a problem here. Till there was problems here.
So you kind of sniffed something, but you weren't really sure that it was, you kind of probably didn't really want to hear people's opinions about things because you weren't necessarily sure yourself. Is that right? What I'm hearing?
Yeah, the red flags. And there were red flags.
Okay.
But I think and let's be clear, where I am today is fully educated on mental health, is much more aware, focused, and educated on communication, the psychological aspect of how people operate and function. And I was not that then. I was just a corporate person moving forward and not having that intricate, detailed information and just making mistakes. So no, I didn't tell my guy friends until, excuse my French, the shit had hit the fan. Now I'm making phone calls and they're like, yeah, that's a problem.
Too little, too late. Huh?
Yeah, you got that right.
Okay, so tell me, you mentioned in the book numerous times about, how important it is for women to follow their intuition. You mentioned intuition a lot. So you didn't follow it, in this book. So what have you learned about intuition and what advice do you give for other folks about it?
Well, I tell everyone that I meet, especially women, to use me as a cautionary tale. I put everything out. I'm extremely transparent. I have no shame in my game. I'm not stifled in life, but I want people to see that this is what happens when you either deliberately have blinders on or you choose not to make the decisions that you have to make. So I always say, use me as a cautionary tale. How did I go from someone who, had a productive life to end up with somebody who would, sell his mama for a meth pipe and end up in this type of caustic situation? It's not trusting yourself. It's not knowing that you know what you need and trusting that you know that this is not a good decision. Setting boundaries and saying, this is what I want in a mate. And if they don't check all the necessary boxes, because you don't get all of them, but the necessary important boxes, that you no longer deal with it. So I oftentimes want them to look, read, and understand that this is what happens, and the tomfoolery I went through was unnecessary. But when you don't, when you don't have the balance that you need, and you put more emphasis on others and the love of others and relationships and then this is the kind of stuff that you fall into. So, women, follow your gut. If it looks like a mess, it's a mess.
I heard that. Oh, by the way, audience, we are going to have a question and answer period in a briefly. So if you have questions, feel free to write them out and get them ready and put them in the question and answer chat part of this presentation. My next question I have for you is, that's a little vague. So you had two marriages, right?
That is correct. Don't say it like that.
No, I'm just asking because your ex, how many did your ex have? Because you alluded to it was multiple, but you didn't put a number on it.
Listen, look, when I married him, he told me he had 5 kids, and all of a sudden 9 popped out the woodwork. He had a total of, I think he's married again. He's had a total, I think I was number 3 or 4. But I want you to put some context with that as well.
Okay.
Because this is also someone, and here's the thing, I don't make any excuses for him. There's never excuse he could ever get from me. But this is also someone struggling with mental illness. Individuals with bipolar disorder that is unmanaged and untreated oftentimes shuffle through relationships and have multiple marriages, as well as do narcissists. Because part of the feel good is people not knowing who you are, that you don't know who you are. So it's not uncommon for someone who has undiagnosed mental illness, who is bipolar or a narcissist, to have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wives or husbands. It's very common. It's always trying to find that new high. That's that whole gaslighting. Well, you know who I am. Well, let me go find a new dummy who don't know nothing and let me, unleash my will on them. So I didn't find out about some of this, just like the drug addiction, until after we were married. So no, he didn't walk up and tell me this, but let's be clear. As I said, and we talked about before, had I vetted him properly or had I met the dog he used to have, I would have known this was a bad idea. So had I met anybody in his family, I'd have put on tennis shoes and been on Highway 80. But I hadn't done that. So I didn't know that the whole family is trauma. This was normal for him.
Okay, duly noted. You mentioned multiple times that there is a person, I believe it's on his side of the family, that was willing to help you. But you don't disclose who this person is in relation to him. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're doing this to protect him or whatever, but is there a reason why this person is referenced generically, but not given even like a relation in the family?
Yeah, let me definitely. So out of the whole family, when I found out that, not giving too much away, that there was some issues with drugs, I reached out and everybody was like, oh Lord, pray to Jesus. We don't know what to do. Good luck on that. Okay, God, thumbs up. This person was willing to kind of come in and kind of support it. But when everything hit the fan and it started getting more aggressive or whatever else, I found them starting to shield and support the madness. It was as if, he may have a good wife and he may have some sobriety. He may be somebody. We can't have that because we all are still in our stuff struggling. So where I found there was a reprise with the relative temporarily, he didn't disappoint. He became much like everyone else and went along to get along because that's what they had been doing. There was really no one, and he did it as it's not his job, but he did it as much as he can. And I often say men who don't have men to support them in being men often a lot of times fail in really catching and grasping that. And he didn't have that. So yeah, they were a support for a while. And then, after a while, my mother used to always say, people want you to get well or die. And it wasn't getting well. I wasn't dying. So.
True that. And thank God you didn't.
Yeah.
Did you ever consider drawing a line? I know that you mentioned in the book that if he ever cheated, that was a deal breaker, right? Mm-hmm. And although it's clearly there's some infidelity in the book, but there's time period wise, it's vague as far as whether it was during the marriage or not, or etc. So was there lines that you drew, and did he understand or recognize that there were consequences if he did not abide by them?
So once I understood and we started treatment for him to get what he needed, the line, and the biggest line, is that I don't come in behind any woman, period. You cheat, you do anything, you kiss, you high five, or you rub her hand, I'm done. And that was the biggest line, because what I understood was that the mental illness and the addiction was so strong. It was too unpredictable. I couldn't put anything else on him. He couldn't really maintain steady employment. So there was just some things you couldn't. But for me, my safety, my body, my sanity, a woman was the line. Now, keep in mind, this is someone who's had a meth addiction. And if you know anything about drugs, if I have done the research, meth is probably one of the drugs that the most promiscuity. It is said in the American Psychiatric Association that 70% of bipolar disorder individuals are promiscuous. They have a high rate of gaining HIV as well. So, these are not illnesses and an addiction that allows him to be, to be a man around town that knows how he's operating. So oftentimes when he would go off the rail, I'd have to spend extra time making sure that, he wasn't out in the street and he saw a cute chicken. And next thing I know, so I spent a lot of time trying to navigate that. It wasn't until it was clear that it actually had happened and I never looked back. But it was tough trying to navigate. But if you read in the book, and listen, it may have happened. It might have happened. I kept myself safe, and after a while, you'll learn in the book. But what can you do when someone is not taking care of themselves mentally? And you can't look at what you hope and you wish. I set many boundaries, but I kept scooting that boundary up because this is my husband and this is for better or for worse. And this is till death do us part. And, this is not his fault. He comes from trauma. He comes from abuse, so you give all those excuses.
Mm-hmm. You give him ways out. I understand.
Yeah. So there's no justification on his part, accountability.
Okay. Now, without giving too much detail away regarding, what happens inside the homes particularly, how do you grapple with the impact that some of this stuff had or potentially could have on your kids? Because there were instances where your children were with their dad, which is great that they didn't witness a lot of things that happened, but there are probably times where they were around. So how did that impact them then, and how does it impact them now in your mind?
Well, one of the things besides the fact that he had taken up with some woman, my son had come to me and he was probably about 10 at the time. He said, "Mom, it's time to let him go." He says, "Maybe you can be his friend later." This is a 10-year-old mine. He said, "But we've done all that we can do." And at that was it. Like, there was no conversation. It was done. But after I filed for divorce and, we moved about onto our separate ways, I sat both of my children down and I apologized to them, because oftentimes parents drag their kids in all of their mess, not realizing these are people, human beings, individuals. They're going to process and take all of this in. And I apologize to them for not vetting this man properly before I brought him into your life, for not knowing that he didn't have the ability to love himself, more or less be of any use or of support to us. And, they were like, "No, Mom, it's okay. We love you. This is that and the other." But I wanted them to understand that men don't behave this way with women. You've never seen your father behave this way. And that men don't dishonor and disrespect women. And I wanted them to understand that. So my son didn't, and he's the sweetest, kindest, most respectful kid. My daughter's super bright, honor roll students, very sharp kids. They know the difference because their dad is a very strong active force in their life, that this is somebody who didn't have love and is misbehaving badly. But I had to accept the onus that I brought this in. They didn't do it. And that this disruption that we have, even though it was for, almost 3 years, that's disruptive to kids who aren't used to screaming and hollering and fighting, that you've got some maniac who has no respect for life. So we had several conversations. Therapy was brought in to make sure that they understood this had nothing to do with them, that this was my bad mistake, and that this would never happen to them again. It's my job to protect them. It's not their job to protect me.
I heard that. And you were right. I agree with you on that. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, feel free to get your questions and answers ready. I've got a couple more questions that I'm going to ask, and then we'll be turning it over to you guys. So be prepared. I wanted to ask you about he had mentioned, and it's a great segue, you were just talking about therapy a moment ago. And after the fact, after all of this that you went through, you learned about PTSD, you learned a lot about, and could understand, have a better perspective of what he went through. Tell me more about the work that you had to do on yourself, because I know, in therapy, and I'm not ashamed to it, most people need to demystify why going to a therapist or seeking help in this regard is a negative thing. But at the same time, I've been through therapy, have a therapist, etc. Explain what work, because they usually require you to do something, even though a lot of the stuff that was going on was based on his addiction, based upon, things that he was doing and your reaction to them. What work did they expect you to work on and require you to work on? And how have you implemented on your journey? Because the book's called My Personal Journey. So how has that impacted your journey?
Therapy was extremely instrumental in me putting one foot before the other. And I want to be clear that by the time this was towards the end, probably around the second year, it was now duty. I was feeling sorry for the person, the love, whatever got us down an aisle was no longer emotionally tying me, but I did feel obligated because I was married to him and beholden because I was his wife, right? So upon removing myself from this situation, I understood I needed therapy for a couple of reasons. Let me be clear. One, the betrayal. It wasn't losing a husband. It wasn't losing him. He wasn't a good husband. It was the fact that I thought so much more of marriage. I grew up in a religion where the pinnacle was a man asking you to marry him, and that's the honor. I was raised to believe that you hold on to your virginity, you marry somebody, you create a family or whatever else. So I still had that thought process that this is my husband. I'm gonna ride or die with him. I'm gonna fight hard for him as long as he don't go out and he not poking the bear somewhere. We good. So I was in that mindset. Now that those things have taken place, I have to process that betrayal was earth shattering for me. I'm a very loyal person, and I couldn't understand how you would marry someone and now have no regard for them. But what the therapist taught me was, and let me tell you, my first year of therapy was really sad over the betrayal. How could he? He ain't nothing. His mom ain't nothing. His daddy ain't nothing. His cat wasn't nothing. By the second year of therapy, I understood that you will make more progress if you focus on you, because he is who he is. You can't change him. You couldn't change him. And for all that you did and sacrifice, he is still who he is. So once I understood that the responsibility was on me taking accountability for my life and not saying, look, he was 100% wrong, but I allowed him to walk. And like, I'm no victim. I allowed this guy to come in with no checks and balance. I allowed that to happen. Once I start dissecting why, how was it this easy? How did I end up with a drug addict with mental problems and not see any of this? Once I start dissecting me, I needed to also learn about bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, because after the marriage, he was still doing things. He wouldn't just go away. So I needed to understand, is this what they do? Is this normal? And that education helped me, Kevin, which was one of the best things that I will say. It helped me not to hate him. I really understood that this was a guy that was abused by his father. He saw him beating on women. He beat every woman before me. And I say often that the only reason why I think that he didn't put his hands on me is there would have been repercussions and consequences. And he knew that. But this is someone who had not managed his life. He has kids all over. There is no managing. So I couldn't do anything for him, but what I could do is make sure I prevent myself from ever being in a situation like that. And I can only do that if I get real with me, figure out how it happened, why it happened, and make sure that it doesn't ever happen again. And then help women, girls, and men who find themselves in a situation beholden to somebody who doesn't even love themselves and don't even know what it means. So.
Okay. Well, final two brief but final questions. One is, please explain the title of the book, because the title of the book, you can assume the other person heart that you're trusting was your ex-husband.
Yeah.
But explain that to us. Go a little bit deeper than that.
Well, I named it trusting someone else's heart because that's the basis of all relationships. Your relationship with your best friend is only as good as his or her heart is towards you. You go into a relationship and that relationship is only going to be as solid and as good as the actual individual that says, I love you, and you can believe, you can honor that, and you guys have respect for that. So if someone tells you they love you and they don't, you will never know. You're only going to be good as their heart, because the actions is really what speaks. The words mean nothing. It's the heart actions which is going to be the thing that speaks. So that's why I named it trusting someone else's heart, because that's really what we are in relationships, trusting that they're legitimate as they are with us.
Word. Well, now that explains it. And I was making some assumptions, but I'm glad you clarified that. Last and final question before we open it up. Well, I see that we have Pete with one in there. Hopefully we'll get some more soon. What takeaways would you like to share with any young girls or ladies who are watching this book launch right now?
Oh my gosh, look, love doesn't hurt. Let me be real clear. Look for the signs. I often say people who are extra agitated, who don't have the ability to accept responsibility for their faults, it's somebody else's fault. That's not responsible. That's something I didn't look for. I saw a grown man who wasn't responsible, and my mind said, "Oh, I can fix it. I can fix him." You can't. I remember one of the ladies when I went to a support group trying to wrangle all of this, and she says, "Well, tell me your story." And I was telling her what happened, this, that, and the other. She says, She said, "That's presumptuous, don't you think?" I said, "What?" She said, "That you have the ability to fix him." She said, "How? You don't even know where the hurt came from. You don't even know when it started." And so that's what I now tell people. You don't have the pieces to the puzzles. You don't have the ability to put someone back together. When someone comes to you with a long list of trauma, send him to the nearest social services so he can get him some help. Give him the information to a support group. It's not your job to fix what a mother and father didn't do, or to fix what that person feel lacks. Require that they get them straight before they come to you, because passing down trauma, it has to land somewhere. It's going to land with you. It's going to land somewhere.
Well,
So
it is going to land somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. I'm grateful that I found my wife, because a man that finds a wife has a happy life. So let me going into Pete's question first. And Mariana, I believe how you pronounce it, just gave a question as well. So we'll get to yours as well. Thank you. So Pete, this is a very complex and beautiful enlightenment in progress. And telling your story as a woman, a man was a problem. As a professional, you know that Black men's frailty is seen as personal failing, weakness, and non-masculine. Please speak on what you know about men who suffer physical and emotional abuse, mental illness, and betrayal from women who may be mentally ill and or drug addicted.
Oh man, listen, that is a wonderful question, Pete. And oftentimes I have probably done about 4 or 5 domestic violence keynotes, and I've had men coming up to me telling me or asking me, if my wife slaps me or talks down to me in front of people, is that abuse? Absolutely. Absolutely. If someone feels it is their job to demean, to belittle you, it's said that men are only 30%, from what I understand, of those who will actually report domestic violence, because men don't want to be seen as weak. I'm sure there's a farther number. I grew up with brothers. I grew up with men. And I wouldn't want a woman slapping and abusing any of my brothers. But I think that there's an expectation that because you're a man, you can take it, deal with it. It's okay. It's all abuse. And if you're in a relationship with someone who is disrespecting, dishonoring you, and talking to you like you have no value, you're in an abusive relationship. If it's not a relationship of love, then what are you in for? You're a masochist. What's the point of that? Wow. I appreciate that.
That's true. All right. Mariana says, do you get tired of telling your story? Does it feel draining at times?
You know, I always tell people, I was doing another book launch and I told the woman, I said, well, this is the story he gave me. If he wanted me to tell a different one, he'd have gave me a different story. But every time I speak and I have someone come up to me that hugs me and or wants to exchange information or tells me that I know exactly what you're going through, I tell my story sometimes different. I tell different versions of it. So in different settings, sometimes I get more nittier and grittier. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it don't call for that. Sometimes it just calls for me trying to empower and encourage. But as long as there's someone out there that could benefit from knowing that a strong woman, a capable woman, a competent woman, a successful woman too can fall in, because oftentimes people think that it's those that are low income and impoverished. Absolutely not. Matter of fact, women that are most susceptible to domestic violence and abuse are women in high income brackets. It's not lower income women. So women need to know that when he acts a fool, or she needs to know, or he needs to know when she acts a fool, then you choose loving yourself. You put you first. It's not your job to make nobody whole. It's their responsibility, and you keep you straight. So I don't get tired of telling my story because I'm at a place now where I'll crack a joke or two. It doesn't, it's passionate for me, but it doesn't trigger me. In the beginning, I couldn't tell it because it would trigger me or I'd start to tear up, but no, not now. You know, I just throw in a bad joke and crack up myself.
Okay. Tara B says, how has this experience helped shape your outlook on life?
Well, one thing I can tell you is that I don't hate men. I was raised around men. My brothers treated me exceptionally well. I was very well doted on, cared on, loved. So I have the utmost respect. What it did is it forced me to make sure that I was good before I go into another relationship. So I don't do what people are doing, passing down trauma, and I make sure. But it also helped me to understand that we all have a purpose and a reason. And I never thought in my 40s that I would be talking about or speaking about domestic violence or having been in any type of relationship. But sometimes you don't know what your purpose is going to be or what you're going to be called to do. And so it's taken me in a different place. It's taken me to a different level of success in my life. But, I will tell you this. And my ex has tried to contact me several times. I will not have conversation with him ever. But I really should give his mistress a gift, because had he not done that step, that allowed me to free myself and say, all right, Tamuri, snap about this. I really should, and allow me to have a whole new purpose. So, when I get around to it, I give him a gift. I'll send him a book.
Well, I'm not getting into some other details of the book. I want people to go and read it, but there's some interesting things that you did to the mistress, so that'll be a teaser. This anonymous attendee says, do you participate in any mental health groups that have open discussions?
Yes. So when I started my journey of awareness of the situation and making sure that I got me straight. Remember, that's what I first needed to figure out after I needed to make myself the victim. I had to figure out, what do I do? NAMI was the first organization that I called. And if you guys aren't familiar, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I signed up with the San Francisco branch because it was larger. And I'm a speaker and presenter for NAMI. I'm the chair of their Black Mental Health Committee. And just in May, we had our first Black Mental Health Summit that I moderated. And we had a couple of wonderful therapists. One was Dr. Jason Outlaw from the Bay Area, as well as Rika Sosa White. She's a licensed clinical social worker. And
I went to high school.
There you go. But we talked about the things that are triggering. We talked about domestic violence, and we talked about it within the Black community and how the different stressors, anxiety in society. On the first and third Friday of every month, I also chair the Black Minds Matter group with NAMI. It's virtual. And we talk about everything. I have folks in there who talk about being transgendered, how to navigate that. We talk about death, domestic violence. We have set up walking dates. We have open discussions, people crying, cursing, whatever the case might be, but it's to be an outlet. And by the end of that meeting, we are dropping resources. Even if it's each other, call me. If you feel that urge coming on, give me a call. So by all means, please, jump into our support group. It's bountiful and full of support. So.
Great. Well, I thank you for all the work that you're doing in the community regarding mental health. And this next question deals with mental health, but I also wanted to say that we're down to our last question. So if there are any more participants that are watching that would like to ask more questions, please do so in the Q&A portion of the webinar. So Deju Mayfield Marsh asks, how do we break the stigma of therapy in the Black community?
We talk about it. You talk about, my anxiety is bothering me, or my PTSD is flaring up, or I don't feel good today. I feel maybe a little off. I felt better last week, but maybe I'm going to talk to somebody, because you only break the stigma when you normalize it. If it's a thing because but it's no longer a thing when you make it every day. I tell people I live with anxiety. I live with PTSD. I didn't have that prior, but when you're married to someone with that level of goings on, you leaving with something. And I was diagnosed afterwards living with anxiety. I tell people now, my anxiety is my superpower. I use my anxiety when I've had enough of people. It'll start twitching like my spidey senses to be like, she got to go. You done had enough of this. Thank you. It allows me to be able to set strong boundaries on what I'm going to deal with. But I keep talking about it. I keep trying to normalize it, encouraging other people to normalize it, because if you don't, then we're still dealing with ain't nothing wrong with that boy. Oh no, he's just a little crazy. Oh no, that bipolar is not. It's killing people. It's killing people because people are making bad decisions. And if you get a copy of my book, you will see kind of the outcome of, my ex-husband and decisions that were made. When you have untreated, undiagnosed mental illness, you don't have the ability to live a productive life. Not all, let me be very clear. I don't want to generalize anything, but bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, things of that nature, some people are crippling with panic attacks and anxiety, can't leave the house. When you don't get that stuff treated, you don't hurt anybody but yourself. So talk about it more. Tell people, I don't feel good. I'm going to go talk to somebody, and make it normal for your family. Normal is such an ugly word. We don't use that in the mental health community anyway, but normalize it in your family that I'm going to go talk to somebody, and I think you should too.
Well, you are absolutely right. And that is something that we do not do well as a community. And I will say that, particularly, it's Black men particularly, they act like going to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist is like, I always say akin to Superman's kryptonite, they're going to lose their superpowers, or people are going to look at them a certain way or act as if they can't handle things on their own. So I definitely think that information, that suggestion she made is very welcomed. We have an anonymous attendee ask, where can we get the book? I believe that we've had that link posted in the chat, but I'm sure someone else is going to grab that and repost it so that you can get it. I'm seeing it here on Barnes & Noble here. I'll repost that as well, so that you can get your own copy and breeze through it. It's an easy read, and I got through it in a day, and you will too.
Yeah.
Any other questions from any participants?
I did, if I can interject something, Kevin, that I just wanted to kind of hit on a little bit, is that, one way, when the one of the people asked about breaking the stigma is also not having, Black women have this really bad, having this superwoman complex that we feel we have to do it all right now. That's a part of that box, that I'm beholding and obligated because people have already put me in that category, so that's what I have to do. And so it's very, it's important that we're really clear on, what our responsibilities are and what aren't. Men picking up, going into relationships with women who have daddy issues. Well, then you're about to be her daddy. And so now you're about to deal with the immaturity of someone. It's looking at things and not attempting to try to fix everything and allowing people to fix themselves is not only the best and the greatest gift that you can give to them, but if you really love and want a relationship with someone, you want to empower them to be their best. You want to empower them to learn and know how to create solutions. That's what you want to do. And getting into situations where you're mothering people or fathering people, all you're doing is adding on extra to you. And I think that's another way we can encourage each other, and listen, Black men need support. Like I said before, I grew up with Black brothers. I love my brothers. I understand that I will never know what it's like to be a Black man living in America, because let me tell you, it is not a bowl of cherries to be a Black woman in America. Let's be real clear, especially in corporate America. It's got its own beast with it. But I don't want to be at the end of your boot because the world is kicking you down. Right. I want you to see me as your counterpart, love and support. That's my expectation. So yeah, it's tough for brothers out here. It ain't easy for us either. But when you come home, let the woman be your support, as when you come home, your wife should be your support, shouldn't be demeaning you and bringing you down. But it has to be a mutual respect and a mutual relationship and a mutual love that we have for each other. I don't want to be beholden to nobody's trauma.
I heard that. And nobody needs anybody else's baggage. I'll tell you that much for sure. Because it's hard out here for a pimp. But now we have Tara Question. Tara B's got another question. I love your passion. It's undeniable. And I commend you for normalizing therapy, psychiatric care, etc. Talking about mental health in a Black family structure can be delicate. What approach should we take when you feel a loved one needs help?
I think that can be very delicate because, one, you don't want to send someone into a shell. But here's what I've learned, and one thing that NAMI has really taught me the importance of is that when you love people, you come and you bring them support. And sometimes that support is, I see that you don't look good, sis. I'm kind of watching how you're moving a little bit, and I want to be able to support you. Can I go with you to a counseling session? Would you like to come with me to a support group? No strings attached. It's just we go on to support each other to make sure we good. Checking on each other. Even sisters having soul circles where you just hashing it out. Maybe someone in the family isn't ready for therapy. I used to do this with my nieces and nephews years ago when they were in elementary school. They'd come over to my house and we'd have a circle and everybody talk about if there was a bully or something, and we'd navigate issues. That's no different for adults. No, everyone's not going to want to go to a therapist. But having an open dialogue in a place that they know if it gets too rough for me, I can call Tara and talk to her about it. That she's going to, at the very least, help me maybe try to figure and navigate something out for me. It can be touchy, but your alternative is doing nothing. And doing nothing should not be acceptable ever. So
I heard that. So we got some soul claps for Soul Circle. I think that's good. I definitely think that, this hits home. Real talk, actually. A buddy of mine had an incident very recently, and a friend reached out to me knowing that I have some experience with what this person was going through, but didn't want to be gossiping and talking behind this person's back. And between me and a few other friends who know this individual, were able to reach out to this person in a way that was not intrusive, and had a person who reaches out from time to time more frequently that would be more welcoming for that conversation to happen, and to broach the subject and to check on that individual, make sure they're okay. So all Black men,
Yeah,
It's possible, it can happen. You just have to be able to have respect for privacy, but also care. And those are two things
absolutely.
I think are very complicated sometimes.
And I think that you said something very important, Kevin, when you said that you had experience with when you come to a situation and you start off with when you know the person might be, not comfortable or not really ready to dive in. I oftentimes start off with my experiences if they're close enough so that they can see that, listen, there's no harm in foul in you telling your experience. I tell people all the time, mistakes are the baby steps to greatness. If you don't make mistakes, you can't ever get to where you're going to be. And those who haven't made mistakes are still embryos. It's impossible. But really having conversations with people and making sure that they understand that you are human too. This is a normal occurrence. I want to be able to support you in what you've got going on. Let me share with you how I handled this when this happened to me. And people will tend to open up when they know that you, in fact, sometimes it's that I got something on you too, but maybe not. But it's just important to you kind of open it up and loosen up the ice. So, always try to lend and share your story with someone. It oftentimes opens up other avenues for conversation with people too. So, yeah. I was looking at the comment that Pete said, definitely the conversation has to be in common. So it needs to make sense so that the other person feels comfortable to do it. They must feel that this is a legitimate something that they would want to open up. So absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we have 5 minutes or so left. Are there any other questions that you guys have before we close? Because I know it's not every day that you're able to get on a Zoom with Tamuri and be able to ask some questions. So while she's here and she's answering, let's get her, without finding out at next Toastmasters, seeing if she says or not, which I've been doing all this whole time. So any other questions from you all before we close?
I did want to say something too while we're waiting for another question, that one of the other reasons why I wrote this book wasn't just to tell that I have a bad picker with husbands. That wasn't, that probably is the top of the bar, but that wasn't why the book. I wanted people to know that I wanted them to understand how I got to that point in life, but also how necessary it is that we make mistakes, that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to have bad decisions and pick the wrong partner. It's not the mistake that defines you. Yeah, I could have sat down and rocked back and forth for a little bit because of the situation, but I had an alternative. I could take that and turn it into something else and not allow someone or something to define me. And I wanted to, if people didn't know anything else, have permission to be as fallible as you are. As long as you don't make the same mistakes and as long as you continue coming out of it bigger and better than before. So it really was kind of like, no, this was not the highlight of who I am. But this happened and it didn't stifle who I became and who I continue to become. So that really was the ending premise of this, is that, listen, from tragedy to triumph, look at it. That's it.
Well, I'm going to ask the final question. Number one, here's the book for everybody to see, get your copy. I'm going to ask this final question. 2 down. You got number 3? What? Number 3 is in the word? What's going on?
This is why you don't ask certain people to moderate.
You got number 3 in you.
Sam, I'm single and ready to mingle.
Here we go. See, 3's the charm, baby. I knew you was still in the building. You got one more strike, girl. You better swing for the fences.
Listen,
you got this.
I'm taking my time. I have plenty of options. I live for me. And the next person that I decide to marry will check all the pertinent boxes off that uphold integrity and honor. And I'm going to check out his mom and his daddy, because y'all know that's the crux to it all, right?
Girl, you better get his social security number and do some background checks. I'm talking about, I'm looking at who they went to elementary school with. You know what I'm saying?
Thanks.
You better go the X-Files on these cats from now on, girl.
That's
But
right.
I'm ready for you. Three's a charm. So we're gonna put out good vibes for you. All right.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're
Hilarious.
welcome. So with that, thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to host you all and to moderate this discussion. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to do that for you. I look forward to seeing other books come from you. Wish you the best of luck. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it. And follow me on social media. I believe my assistants put that in the box. Follow me, comment, conversate with me, and stay in contact. Absolutely. This is book number 4. I am working on book number 5. So.
and Art Harry mentioned something in the chat. He's single. You might be able. You might work on number 3 before this is over.
Oh my God. Good night, everybody. Oh my God. Oh, okay.